Morning, everyone. Happy International Women's Day, and welcome to an all-female news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox, and the Mirror's online executive editor and Pod Save the Queen host, Anne Gripper. Today, we're going to be talking about a woman who committed the worst of all female crimes. She stepped out of line. Now, through it all, we want you to ask us your questions, get into the comments, tell us what's on your mind, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. Anne is a reservoir of information and knowledge about the royals, and that's the one big thing everyone's talking about today. Whether you like Meghan and Harry, whether you don't, whether you approve of their interview or not, let us know in the comments, and we'll do our best to address any issues that you've got. Don't bother being racist, anybody. You won't get mentioned. And despite all the pre-briefings by the palace we had this week, that they would ignore this silly woman's sideshow, there are a few things in this interview that Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, did with Oprah Winfrey, which aired overnight, which really can't be so easily brushed over. And whole forests have been chopped down to analyse it today, all the way through Fleet Street. So, Anne, take us through the main revelations.
Well, it's probably not actually forests just yet. That will come tomorrow, because obviously the interview aired overnight. So it was very much squeezing it into late editions as the revelations started coming through. And I mean, obviously this has been talked about for days, ever since it was first revealed that they would be doing it in that kind of momentous week when Meghan first won her privacy case. Then they announced that they were pregnant, and then the news dropped that they would finally be doing this tell-all interview with Oprah, their good friend who they'd met once before their wedding. So there's that kind of interesting background to what is that relationship really like? I mean, I've got friends that I have never met. That's the beauty of the internet. But it's an interesting question. But that aside, The interview has arrived. I mean, the palace arguably, or some people were saying, essentially got their defence in early last week as those previous bombshell revelations got leaked of former staffers at Kensington Palace saying essentially that they had felt badly treated by the Duchess of Sussex during her time at Kensington Palace, and an investigation being launched certainly into the handling of what happened when those claims were made and how that should be dealt with. So that was the kind of the background to all of this.
So they were giving their defence without really knowing what the accusations were. Now we've heard them.
I think a lot of the things that came through, the themes were probably expected. We expected Meghan to talk about race and whether that was potentially an issue either within the family or her treatment in the media. That definitely did come to light. We expected her to talk about sort of feeling unsupported and her relationship within the family. I mean, I think there's two things that are particularly damaging. I haven't yet watched the interview. I'm looking forward to watching that on ITV at 9:00 tonight to see it in all of its gory detail. But I have been reading extensively what my colleagues who were working hard overnight have been writing about it on the Mirror. So I think the two sort of most damaging aspects of it are Meghan saying that there were repeated conversations about how dark Archie's skin might be during her pregnancy. And obviously she's the first person of colour to marry into the royal family, and from the very start, how she would be treated has been a subject of discussion. It has been a point of reflection for the country, in theory for the royal family as well, but whether they address that as well as perhaps they could have done is unclear. Certainly Meghan feels certainly not, and that these conversations were deeply inappropriate. They haven't said who the person was who said these things, and have said that they won't, which is, you can see that two ways. Either they are protecting someone, or it is brushing everybody.
Yeah,
it's kind of
implies that information is valuable and it's got detonating capabilities. So I would suggest that it is someone who is not distant from the throne. It's not someone who just works for the throne. It's someone who is very important to the future of the monarchy who has done that, because the phrase very damaging is not one that you would use, say, if it was someone who was already mired in child sex trafficking scandals, or who had already been known to say things that were racist, or who was a cousin of a cousin, or was a shadowy palace nobody. You would only say very damaging if it was someone very important.
It's clearly not Prince Philip. I mean, let's face it, he's had a reputation over the years of saying things that at the time were probably considered politically incorrect and gaffe, and would now be considered, you know, if you said the things that he said now, there would be an absolute almighty row and stink about, you know, racism and attitudes that haven't been modernized. And, you know, I think there's a lot of us with elderly relatives, or who have had elderly relatives, where you recognize that their opinions are from an absolutely different age, and you try to change them and it's not always possible. But anyway, I don't think it's Prince Philip, but otherwise we don't know. But it is a really damaging area of conversation. And also Meghan essentially implying that she feels that was a factor in Archie not being a prince, although in terms of the way the royal family is constructed and tradition and blah, 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 he is not in direct line to the throne, and he is a great grandchild of the Queen rather than a grandchild of the Queen. And so the rules are different, and we are seeing different things happening purely because the Queen has been alive and reigning for so long. So he would be eligible to be a prince once Prince Charles is on the throne, as far as I understand it. So anyway, so that
he can't be made a prince after he's born. I don't think it would only be if Charles was a sovereign, he would have become a prince. But that's kind of
sliding doors.
It's slightly unusual. Now, Katie says, "Do we believe that Meghan was driven out?" How long is a piece of string, Katie? I think it's a bit of everything. To be honest, I think everybody's probably got something a bit near right.
I was going to say that the other hugely, and I was going to say the other hugely damaging thing, which potentially would be the thing that made them feel like they had no choice but to leave, is Meghan saying that she felt essentially like life would be better if she wasn't there, talking about having had suicidal thoughts, having talked about sort of telling Harry how she felt a few hours before going to this Cirque du Soleil appearance, where you've got this appearance of glitz and glamour and this, you know, designer sequin dress and dolled up to the max for the red carpet. But that wasn't how she was feeling. She was having to put on a show in this role and you know, put a game face on to do her job that she had married into. In terms of was she driven out? I mean, I think it's really complicated. I think there is that thing of, did they do enough to enable her to feel like she could stay? I think that it was her entry to the royal family was very different from Kate's. You know, Kate and William had been in a relationship at university. They'd spent a lot of time together before Kate married into the job. They'd split up for a while. You know, they both wanted to be very, very sure that they were, you know, that this was right for them, and that she could cope with it. And then even after they got married, you know, they went and lived on Anglesey, and William was doing his normal job as a helicopter pilot.
I mean, they did have a very different introduction to royalty, Kate, and part of that is having been born here, I think. Now, Sule says, I think it's Sule, apologies if I got it wrong, why is skin colour so important for the royal family? It doesn't matter to most of us, or a lot of us, or not as we hope it doesn't matter anyway. But it does seem that when Kate was introduced to the royal family, she was hugely protected by the royals' lawyers, who went after every newspaper that stepped out of line long before she got engaged to William. I mean, the moment she turned up, partly because of William's insistence and his apparent promises to her family that she would be protected in a way that his mother wasn't. And also because she was going out with someone who was the heir to the throne, second in line to be heir to the throne. And, you know, her position was very different to that of Meghan, who then comes in, who does not have all that hinterland of growing up with royalty, and knowing sort of how it works in with government and the constitution and with the press, and understanding how some of that, what the expectations would be of you. So perhaps the skin colour, Sule, affected how she was looked after, because on the one hand, from the interview last night, she says she was unsupported. She says there was no one around her. She didn't have the help. On the other hand, they shared offices with William and Kate. Then that wasn't good enough. They split. They had their own offices. They had their own press team. They had millions of pounds given to them by Prince Charles from Duchy of Cornwall accounts to run their own offices. And they had some independence within the royal machine. And perhaps it puts into context some of these allegations of bullying that we've heard, when it's a woman of colour putting pressure on her staff to do better because she's under pressure. That's seen as bullying. If Kate or someone else were to put pressure on their staff, it will be seen perhaps as demanding rather than bullying. If it was similar, who knows? Maybe that's the difference that skin colour makes to this. I don't know why they're bothered about Archie's skin colour. It's just, I find that disgusting, personally. But keep asking your comments, everyone. Get in the question. Tell us what you think about what's been going on. And do you think that this does put into context some of the accusations the palace has made in the past few weeks about Meghan, about how they were being petulant, about how they were like working with a couple of teenagers, about the bullying and the this sort of thing that they didn't like, and everything was done to look after them, but nothing was good enough. Does it help explain some of that? I mean, if you're feeling suicidal.
Well, yes. I mean, there's various different aspects in there. Like, what is essentially unforgivable is if Meghan did ask for help and they said, "Oh no, you can't possibly have help," that would be damaging. It's like that is fundamentally against everything that William and Harry have been working for over the last, through their sort of adult working royal lives, setting up Heads Together, talking about the impact of their mother's death on their own mental health, Harry talking about having had therapy and counselling, and, Meghan taking the step of asking for help. If she was denied help, then whoever denied her that help, that is a person who definitely does need to be investigated or re-educated or sort of all of the above. Like that is not okay, and it sort of undermines the new face of the royal family, which has been very supportive in that space. So that, I think, is probably even worse than Meghan getting to a place that she felt like that in the first place, but that when she did ask for help, they said, no, that's not okay.
You're not important enough to the firm. Your position is too peripheral and all the rest of it, when she felt that she was bringing some star qualities to it, I suppose.
But I think there is this thing as well about her hinterland. You talked about sort of Kate's hinterland. Meghan's hinterland is very different. Hers is having lived a very independent life, being a successful actress, living in Hollywood, and maybe she thought she did understand how things worked. But the royal family and celebrity are two different things. They're both in the public eye, but how they function is hugely, hugely different. And I feel like part of it is that clash of cultures.
Yeah, I think a lot of part of it is American versus British, as opposed to black and white, as opposed to being a female. All those things are bad enough. But I think a lot of it is an American, and I know friends who've married Americans, they have similar, can't get their head around some things in this country that just operate differently, like hierarchies at work as opposed to meritocracies and other things. But royalty and the fact that you keep your mouth shut because of the constitution implications, it just seems to me that she didn't. Second spread in the paper, there's a piece written by Jenny Bond, which talks about a woman that Prince Charles was going to marry a few years before Diana, and that the reason she refused him, it was a lady called, where was she? Sorry, she got here in a minute. A lady called Amanda Knatchbull, who was Earl Mountbatten's granddaughter, and she turned down Charles because she said it would involve, quotes, a loss of independence unlike in any other marriage and an absolute surrender of self to a system. You and I know that's what the royal family is like, not just because we're journalists, but because we grew up in this country and we've seen it operate for generations. Meghan didn't have that. She didn't realise she was surrendering everything. She didn't have that connection, did she, to what was going on? Now, Im says, why should Meghan and Prince Harry stay silent over the way they were treated? The most racist and hurtful comment about the skin colour of their baby. Why ever made that sort of comment? Silence is complicit. Awareness should always be raised where racism is concerned. And if she's being told not to say anything just because that is the way the institution works, but someone's talking like that about your baby, why would you want to shut up? Of course you want to say something. If that person who said it is in a position of power, of course you want to let people aware of it and the damage that could do to the monarchy. And I can see that you would just be tearing your hair out in that situation.
And before, Meghan had no sort of access to say these kind of things. And I think this is one of the interesting things about her mentioning that her passport and her keys, she didn't have access to them after she married into the family. And I feel like that's a sort of symbolic loss of control and independence rather than actually not having access to them, because you're living in a big house, you've got a load of staff to look after your stuff. Like, you kind of would expect somebody else to take your passport and keep it safe somewhere. And
exactly, there's servants everywhere going through your knicker drawers and things and doing your wardrobe. I mean, they would just take it away and put it in a bank for you because that's where it's going to be safe. So I can see that.
But and the lady who turned down Prince Charles, smart lady. It is that difference between, the imagination of what is the life of a fairy tale princess versus, what is the life of a real working royal princess, if you like. Mm. So Danielle Marie Roberts saying, didn't they step back from the royal family to lead a private life? So much for that. I hear more of them now than I ever did before. And I think that is one of the major sort of debates at the moment, like aside from even that Oprah interview, but the confusion about what they said as they left. So they left because they wanted financial independence, they wanted privacy, or they wanted to be sort of away from the scrutiny, certainly. But we do see a huge amount of them. They are making a huge stir, and it's not like they're coming, saying their piece and then disappearing. And I think on the money front, Prince Harry saying that Prince Charles cut them off, it's just like, well, you said you wanted to live independently.
But there's obviously a tailing off that needs to happen before the new money kicks in. Maybe there was a period where things were difficult and you had to rely on his mum's inheritance, he said. But how many of us have millions of pounds from our mothers we can rely on? Don't moan, Harry. You're doing quite well. And the thing is, Danielle, as well, it wasn't just to live a private life. They wanted to have a controlled life that they were in control of, and that meant in control of their privacy. Every royal that currently exists has had a privacy action against newspapers at some point. That's not unusual for Harry and Meghan to do it. But it's the fact they wanted control over that, and that's what they've got here. Because one of the more interesting things, I think, is this allegation about crying before the wedding. And it was reported for years that Kate was in tears after a confrontation with Meghan at a dress fitting before the wedding. And Meghan now reveals that actually was her in tears. And she said she doesn't want to disparage Kate because she says she owned it. Horrible phrase, but she admitted it. She said sorry. She apologised. She sent flowers and a note, and they got over it. But that is someone from the palace has briefed a bit of the truth, or someone who was in a position to know it has told journalists a bit of the truth, and it's the exact opposite of what Meghan thought. And she was being told, you don't talk to the press because that upsets everything, so don't say anything. But then, because we will talk to them for you and you will be protected. But they were lying about her to protect the more important part of the monarchy, because if it had come out before the wedding that Kate made Meghan cry, that would be an entirely different atmosphere for the whole country when we were watching them get married. How happy?
Well, except now they tell us that they were already married.
Exactly.
So,
but who cares about that? I don't care about that. They had a state wedding that everyone could see and have fun. It's not like she was a virgin and they show the wedding cheeks next morning like they used to. Who cares?
I don't know. I think there is something about it being important that people know what they are witnessing. I mean, part of marriage is literally people witnessing the register. I've not, sufficiently looked into it, but I thought that if you were already married, then it was a different kind of a service that you had to have, like it was a blessing rather than doing the vows. And
there would have to be a wedding certificate, and there would have to be witnesses. And it sounds like they rang the Archbishop of Canterbury and he performed a sort of a thing privately for them. But unless there were witnesses, and unless there was a registrar, and unless there was a registration of that wedding, it's not valid, it's not legal. So the one they actually went through, that we all saw, was the legal wedding. The one they had before was like a pretend wedding.
In my head, it's like Sandy and Danny in Greece making their true love vows. That's what happened before.
Now, Mike said, this is her take on it. What does Buckingham Palace said? She was told how it's going to be when she married him. This is the thing, Mike. Was she told? Did Harry let her down by just letting her think that she was marrying someone who was rich and famous from a rich and famous family, and not pointing out that there was a political, constitutional role to it, and that she was always going to have to take it in the chops from whoever was nearer the throne than she is, which is only two people who are nearer to the throne than her, isn't there? So did Harry let her down, Anne, do you think?
Harry is so absolutely besotted with her. You can imagine that he might have tried to sugar the pill to make sure that she didn't run screaming for the hills, or that they really believe.
Like all the other girlfriends who knew how it would
be. Exactly. And to a certain extent told her what she wanted to hear, or said, or truly believed that they would be able to change things from within. And I think this is sort of the crux of it, and which nobody will ever truly know, because even the people that were there will have different views of it. So the Buckingham Palace feel like they tried to carve out sort of new roles within the family to make the most of this, glitzy power couple that everybody was in love with and excited about. Having a woman of mixed race in the royal family was a hugely exciting thing. The wedding went off brilliantly. So from the palace's side, I think certainly at the time they felt like they were trying to be progressive about it all, and Harry and Meghan clearly feel like that didn't happen how they wanted it to be. And obviously the absolute result is that it didn't work out, so something clearly did go wrong. But those people that were in that moment experienced that thing differently, essentially.
Yeah. And so many of them have different requirements and expectations of the monarchy, as we all do as well. As you can probably see in our comments, there will be people in there expressing all sorts of views, some sane and some otherwise. And Atlee says, I guess this is everything I'm going to be talking about today and this week for sure. How about the rest of our lives, Atlee? I think we're going to be about this.
Still talking about the Diana interview.
But even if you don't care about the royalty, or you think it's an irrelevance, or you want a republic, or you love Meghan, or you hate Meghan, or Harry, or anything else, this is the thing that other people are talking about, and this is what we do on the News Agenda Explained, is we explain to you and for you what's happening and why it's happening, so that when you hear other people going on about this, you know what bit's tripe and what bit's not. Now, Christine said, so sad it's come to this. She's got a point, hasn't she, Anne? Because, like you said, Meghan was a brilliant asset, absolutely fascinating woman, beautiful, rocks all the front pages, rocks a dress, freed up Kate and William to do other stuff. Because they weren't so close to the throne, they could do things that were a little more slightly political, talking about women of colour and talking about poverty and other issues, which those, Kate and William perhaps can't do for more sensitive reasons. They were such an asset. They could have been so brilliant, and it's a failure of the palace, a failure of the institution somehow that it's come to this, isn't it?
Well, even beyond that, it is the disintegration of a family. And you think back to how close William and Kate and Harry used to be as a trio, or certainly appeared to be in public. They did everything together. There's an argument that that is not normal once you become grown ups. It's normal to go off and build your own families and retain a close relationship with your sibling, but not spend all your time in each other's pockets. But William and Harry went through an immense amount. They are the only ones who have that shared experience of what what growing up as, you know, the sons of Charles and Diana and losing their mother was like. They're the only people who can share that, and that whole sort of family network as well. You know, they're now living thousands of miles away. Even if we hadn't had the pandemic over the last year, how much would the Queen and Charles and Camilla, you know, how much would they have been able to see their grandson? And, you know, the baby who they revealed on the Oprah interview is going to be a baby girl, little sister for Archie. You know, will they get to meet her, or how often? And, you know, it's tough for any family when you are miles and miles apart, but when that divide is not just a physical divide of miles, but it's an emotional divide of miles now. It's enormous.
Would you let your child near someone who had questioned its skin colour? Who knows? Now, Trevor says, why don't you just stop knocking, speculating and being downright condescending and nasty about the royal family? Get a life! Well, Trevor, you're watching the News Agenda Explained. As I just said, we are explaining what's happening in the news. We're not taking a side in what's happening in the news. And it is International Women's Day. And it's worth pointing out to those of us who have long forgotten that in the 12th century, Eleanor of Aquitaine married into the royal family and was terribly abused for having an opinion and having her own power and her own money. She ended up locked in a tower by her husband for a decade or more. Caroline of Brunswick in the 18th century. Every woman who marries into this family is seen as a risk, because it comes part of bloodlines and pedigrees, and they're all kind of a bit like horses, and it matters because they somehow might influence things wrong or different. And we've got the same issue with Meghan, and that is medieval. We didn't have it with Kate so much. There was a bit of, oh, she's a commoner, if you remember, and there was a bit of, oh, you know, her mother opened cabin doors on planes or something, but it wasn't quite as, it was snide. It wasn't as bad as Meghan has had, but they have all had it. Sophie Rees-Jones, they've all had it. Marry into the royal family, get pilloried, literally. Now, Alan says, as someone suffering from mental health problems, which I can prove, I object to them playing the mental health card without giving any proof. Why should we believe her? And Alan, how can you give someone proof for the fact you stayed awake all night crying? What do you want? A video diary? I don't think you can automatically disbelieve her, put it that way. Just because she's an actress, you can't assume she's always acting. She wasn't a very good actress. So, you know, if you can believe what she's doing in the interview, then I think she's probably not acting, to be honest. Suits wasn't that good. But do get into the comments and keep telling us what you think. Now, there's one interesting thing, Anne, that I haven't seen any of the coverage yet. And there was one person who wasn't mentioned, which is Prince William. He wasn't in there anywhere.
This is true, because obviously there was, you know, the reports of the sort of breakdown or cooling of William and Harry's relationship has been an ongoing point of discussion. And certainly in the documentary when Harry was on tour in Africa, that was when Harry did speak about it. So it is interesting that this time around he has decided not to speak about it. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we see that as being a positive thing. And I do think it's interesting thinking about sort of the hierarchy question and coming into places. That's something you were saying earlier. So Meghan, she could have been the best royal in the history of the world, but she would never have been able to get promoted. She would always have been stuck in the place that she was. And, you know, even if she was more, you know, regal than Kate, or doing more charity work, or more this or that, more that, there was no opportunity for more ability.
That would have made her more of a threat, because it would have pointed out that that's not how the people who are actually going to be on the throne behave. And so it would have been more of a problem. Whereas if she was doing less, then she'd be called being lazy, wouldn't she? So anyway,
it's a challenge for the royal family. They now need to work out, are they going to say anything or not? So it was shown in America last night. It's going to be on ITV tonight at 9:00. If they are going to say anything, do they say something today before it goes out in the UK, so people are seeing it through the royal, you know, with the royal family's response to it before they're watching it? Or do they wait? Do they let the ITV documentary go out or interview go out? let people see it in full and have another round of reaction and then decide whether they need to respond or not. I mean, it is a big day for the royal family and the advisors within it to work out whether to say anything and what to say, and whether, had they said something earlier in the whole piece rather than the never complain, never explain adage, which for a long time they've tried to live by. If they had binned that earlier in the piece, would we be in a very different place now? I mean, I'm sure we'll be talking about this a lot more on Pod Save the Queen this week. So if you're into podcast land, then do check out our royal podcast.
Yes, definitely. And don't forget the Meghan interview is on at 9 tonight. Not that anyone's going to be able to miss it on ITV. But this is the thing, isn't it? In the last couple of days, we've had the royal advisors saying, it's just a sideshow, it's just a circus, we don't need to worry about it, whatever, we're above all this. And then yesterday, when it started, the mirror splash and how Kate might be involved in some of the allegations, it started to trickle through that perhaps there were things in here which they were going to be finding more squeaky bum time. And then they've started, in today's paper, they've got a slightly more placatory, palace sources saying, oh, well, we need to take a step back and let the dust settle and we'll be a bit more gentle and blah, blah. So they've got, I don't know how. The allegation that Kate made someone cry is damaging, even if she's apologised and it was just one of those things. The allegation that you've cut your son off from funds, which is Prince Charles's personal funds, not to do with the Crown, they're from the Duchy of Cornwall, they're his, and from his biscuit company, right? He can afford to fund Harry's security for a bit. He just refused, apparently. And then this allegation of race and someone close to the throne really caring what colour Archie's skin was. You can't, if you're a PR professional, there's no way out of that. There's no way you can make that sound better or gloss it over or say from the other point of view, we were only asking in Archie's best interests because the newspapers were going to be horrible to us. You can't possibly smooth that over. You can't sandpaper it. You're stuffed. So PR-wise, you just got to shut up and say nothing, haven't you? But then if we all really care, then it becomes hugely damaging and they can't ignore it. So what are they going to do, Anne? Come on, you're the expert.
I don't know. It's interesting. Sometimes when you feel like you really want to have your say, Prince Andrew, then it might have been better if you had actually, well, in Prince Andrew's case, spoken to the FBI and dealt with that whole situation. But certainly speaking to Newsnight was not the answer, and that whole kind of who gets to have the last word. And I think the Sussexes, even if the royals did come out and say something, I think the Sussexes would respond. I don't think that they will ever let the palace have the last word. They want their narrative. They want to be heard. There's no reason why they shouldn't be, but it just means it makes it much more risky and hard for the palace to engage in responding to the allegations that are put to them, I feel. So that's, I don't know, tricky day.
I think that reference to the very damaging, not giving the identity of the person who asked about Archie's skin colour, I think that's a bomb that's been waved, going, we'll detonate this if you upset us any further. So I think that's going to make people in the palace go, be a bit more cautious. Anyway,
good news.
Apart from that, we've got some good news that's got nothing to do with the royal family. Hooray! Now, regular viewers of this Facebook Live, the News Agenda, will know we've spoken several times about John Ross, who's on Twitter at John's Campaign. And he's 89, he's got vascular dementia, and in the past year, he has not been able to see his wife, Marlene. He was recognising her and doing well. That little inset picture you can see there of him with his teeth out was kind of how he degenerated a bit while he was in his care home with no one to come in and see him. Obviously, he had his carers, but they're stretched, and without seeing his loved ones, he was perhaps not having quite the reason to put his teeth in he normally would. The good news is that as of today, because their care homes now, some of them have opened up, John and lots of others like him are now seeing their loved ones. There's Marlene there holding his hand. He's kind of forgotten a little bit who she is, apparently, according to the copy, but as they keep on seeing each other, she can see him every day now. She's been designated an essential carer. She can keep on seeing him, and he will you know, get something out of that, which is amazing news after a whole year, Anne, a whole year of not being able to do that.
No, it's unimaginable, really. I think, you know, those of us who are separated from families, like, that is hard enough. But if you're a member of your family is in a care home, I think it's particularly distressing for people who are suffering from dementia, because physical needs, I think, are probably a lot it's easier maybe for the care home staff to be able to support on those, but the sharing of memories and remembering what your wife's face looks like, that's not something that a carer can really help you with.
No.
You know, it is that contact, and hearing, you know, radio interviews with people talking about how hard it has been, not just not to see them, but to know that their loved ones are becoming unwell and are losing time through all of this. You know, it's really sad. And, you know, everything that we've been doing over the last year has been to essentially improve people's lives and prolong people's lives, and give the NHS a chance to be able to look after people and all of that. But for those people they've lost time, like, they will never recover that time. What would they have been, you know, would their time have been better spent if they had been able to continue to see their loved ones through it all? I mean, that is the sort of impossible question that people have been wrestling with.
The families of the 410,000 people in care homes say that a lot of them, they've degenerated faster. You know, they've got a degenerative disease, and it's going to end up in a bad place, but it's happened sooner because of the lockdown and because of not being able to get in there. Now, there's some brilliant stuff in that story. I suggest you read it on the Mirror online, or go and buy the paper, because there's some fascinating stuff in there about people who have been able to see their loved ones and the difference it's made to them. But also, it's a postcode lottery. Some homes, they've only had 4 days notice. They're not there in time yet. And there are some homes that, for reasons of caution or insurance, still are uncertain or don't want to open up to loved ones. And it's only guidance from the government. It's not a law, so they don't have to. Now, Lynn says, great to see family members can see their loved ones that are in care homes. It's precious times to spend together. Quite right, Lynn. And let's just try to feel positive about those who have been able to see their loved ones and give them a big old hug. Now, thank you for joining me, Anne. Thank you, everyone.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone in the comments, from the lunatics to the Megheads to the rest of you. Thank you for taking part. Sorry if we couldn't get all your comments in. And don't forget the Meghan interviews on ITV tonight at 9 o'clock. I'm sure most of us will be sitting there gripped by it. And if you're not, you'll be on Netflix or Disney Plus or something. We're doing something else. But you'll be out of the loop, won't you? Thank you for joining us. And we'll see you again on Wednesday for the news agenda. Bye-bye.